Well, welcome everybody to the Salty Pastor Podcast. Doing something a little different today. What I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be walking while I'm recording my podcast. So if you're watching on YouTube, you're going to see me strolling across the lovely countryside of McFarland, Wisconsin. This is lake country, so you got to be careful. Everywhere you turn, there is a lake. But the other thing too, it's a little cloudy today. I was hoping for some sun and a beautiful day to record, but wasn't meant to be. That's okay. We're currently in our series right now about belief. And the question that I want to ask today that really helps apply what we've been learning is this: is it possible to heal the division in our country? I mean, why is it so hard for Americans to just basically come together and be on the same page? We don't have to agree on every little thing. We don't have to agree on what food we're going to eat or what music we like or where we want a holiday or any of those types of things. But we definitely need to have some agreement, right? We have to have some unity, or we're so fractured and divided, we just can't get along. As a matter of fact, this is illustrated in a historical event within American history called the Civil War. And that is where two groups of American citizens, the North and the South, could not coexist with each other, right? One group based on the issue of slavery. One group said, well, we're just going to secede. We're going to keep doing what we want to do. We don't care what you think. And the other side, the North, said, no, we're going to remain in union and we're going to get rid of this. And they fought a war over it, and the North won. Have you ever wondered what would happen if the South would have won? What would it look like? What would have happened? You just never know, do we? What's so interesting is that what a lot of people forget is that Abraham Lincoln's primary goal was to maintain the union of the United States. So that's what he was going to war over. And he knew that the issue was slavery. This doesn't mean that the Civil War wasn't fought over the issue of slavery. What it does mean is that the mission was to end slavery in order to maintain the union of the United States. Well, here we are today. Many people are saying we're in a cultural civil war or a social civil war. I don't know what adjective people want to throw in front of it, but the bottom line is when you're in a war, particularly a civil war, that means things are divided. I think the question is, why can't we come to any agreement on what, that we can get along? It seems that at this point, we're in like 51% majorities. The division of the political parties is so close, right? It seems like our elections are won by razor-thin margins more and more and more. And what's interesting, though, is that sometimes a party gets in control and then it just kind of really goes, over the top. I think everybody, regardless of what side of the political aisle that you are on, everybody agrees that Joe Biden ran as a moderate and that he was going to bring the country together. But as soon as he was elected, whether it was his administration or the people he picked or himself, we may never know, they started to implement policies that were so far left. I mean, they were as left as you could possibly get. They were even shocking to the moderate Democrats. And so because of that, our country became more divided, not more together. So how do we heal the division in our land? I mean, is it possible? Now, there's basic propositions out there on how to do this. The first one is this, and that is that, well, we just tolerate what everybody wants to believe. Diversity is our strength. And what they mean by that is you can believe whatever you want to believe, you can do whatever you want to do, and we should not only tolerate it, but affirm it. And in doing so, we can, come out stronger. Well, we've been applying that philosophy for the last 25 to 30 years. And what we have is more division, more balkanization, meaning more subgroups than ever before. We don't have more unity and more camaraderie, more patriotism. We don't have more of that. We don't have a more unified country. We have a more divided country. The other approach is this, is that we need to get back to the basics of civics, and we need to teach people, particularly students, the essence and the point of what it means to be an American, which that's a good point as well. We don't know the impact of that right now because that's not what we've been doing for the last 30 years. Many people graduate from high school, they don't even know how our government works, right? They don't understand that the legislature, the Congress makes laws, and that the president enacts the laws or signs the laws, is supposed to execute the laws. Most people don't understand how our basic government works. People don't understand how our economy works. They can criticize it and they can criticize disparity, but they don't have any basic understanding of how the economy actually works. And so we don't know if that approach will work or not unless we go back further into our American history and see where they applied that approach and how it impacted the nation. So what I would like to do is talk about kind of a different perspective, and that is the perspective that the Bible kind of teaches. And on Tuesday, we talked about this, and that everything starts with belief, okay? And the book of John, the Gospel according to John, is filled with over 100 references, or not quite 100 references, to believing, and that belief is necessary and critical and important and all of those things before anything else can happen. And one of my favorite passages is where it talks about belief is found in John chapter 14, verses 1 through 11. So I'm going to read this, and I'm going to read it from my little tiny New Testament. This was given to me, and it was originally in August given to a Sergeant Ralph Robinson, Army Air Force, in August of 1945, towards the very end of World War II. And I want to read it for you. I'm not going to walk and read at the same time because I might run into something. But John 14:1 starts with this. Do not let your heart be troubled. Believe in God, believe also in me. Now Jesus is speaking here. In my Father's house there are many mansions, or many rooms. If it were not so, I would have told you. I go to prepare a place for you. And if I go to prepare a place for you, I will come again and receive you into myself, that where I am, you may be also. And it's interesting, they use an old English word here, and whither I go, he says, you know the way that I go. Thomas then said to him, Lord, we know not where you are going, and how can we know the way? And Jesus said to him, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father but through me. If you have known me, you should have known my Father as well. And from this point forward, you know him and you have seen him. All right. So Philip then says to him, Lord, show us the Father, and it will be enough. And Jesus said to him, have I been so long with you, and yet you do not know me, Philip? He that has seen me has seen the Father, right? So how can you now say, show us the Father? Believe you that I am the Father, and the Father is in me. See the word believe there again? Believe it. You have to believe that I am in the Father is in me, that God and I are one, okay? He says, the words that I speak to you, I speak not of myself, but the Father that dwells within me. He does the works that I do. Believe me that I am the Father, I am in the Father, and the Father is in me. Or, if you can't believe that, he says, believe me based on the works that I do. See, what he's saying is that, first and foremost, here's a propositional truth that you must believe in order for you to get it, in order for you to understand this reality that you live in called life. He said, and if you struggle with that truth, then I challenge you, just look at the works. Just look at the works of what I have done and what I am doing and believe in that. from the earliest time, what we've found over the last 2,000 years, that wherever Christianity goes and grows, it gets better. Now, notice I differentiate between Christianity and religion, because sometimes, the Catholic Church would go places and things would get worse, not better. Look at the movie The Mission, for instance, is a perfect example that the Catholic Church at that time was more of a political organization than a gospel-oriented organization. Look at Eastern Orthodoxy. Today, there's a real movement about how Eastern Orthodoxy is like supposedly the original church and it's never changed. And this is just simply not true. It's not historically or factually accurate. It's changed dramatically over the centuries. And everywhere it went, it didn't always do the right thing either. Look at modern day evangelical churches. They do a lot of really great things. You go to some mega churches and guess what? They don't always do the right thing. So I'm not talking the religious denominationalism of Christianity. I'm talking about just basic Christian orthodoxy, Christianity in its purest form. And what you find is that pretty much everywhere it goes, it really does some pretty remarkable things. You look at where other ideologies go, like Islam, Buddhism, or even Hinduism, and what you find is atheism. You don't find things getting better. Often you find them getting much, much worse. So what am I trying to say to you guys here is, well, everything starts with belief. And the works of Christianity are worth believing in and of themselves, even though that's not why we believe. We believe because of the revealed truth. So you know why we're never going to heal the division that's in our land right now by just coming together and singing Kumbaya and putting coexist bumper stickers on our cars? Because there are beliefs that people hold in our society today that are incompatible. They're antithetical, and they cannot coexist. Case in point, here's just a couple things I want you to think about, okay? And I want you to consider these. But these are beliefs that it is impossible for them to coexist at the same time. Now, in logic, they talk about this all the time, is that you have ideas and concepts and principles that are mutually exclusive. In other words, if you believe one, you by default are saying you don't believe the other one. And it's very important. Like, for instance, someone would say, well, there are married bachelors. And you say, no, there are no married bachelors. You can't believe there are married bachelors and believe there are no married bachelors, because then words become meaningless. And the problem that we have with division in our world today is that so much of it is based upon the fact that words that people use have become meaningless. So let me talk about some specific examples here for you to consider. I want you to really mull these over, okay? Number one, there are people in our nation today that are theists, meaning they just basically have a belief that there is a God. And then you have groups of people, much smaller, that say there is no God. They are called atheists, okay? It's important to note these two beliefs cannot coexist. They cannot coexist side by side. Now, what's fascinating about these two beliefs is that for those who are theists, particularly Christian theists, not Islamic or what would you say, type of monotheists, but Christians in their orientation always say that they always leave room for people to not believe in God. They might even say, you know what? It's okay. If you don't want to believe in God, you don't have to. You're not forced to do it, particularly in America. What's really interesting is you look historically throughout the world, particularly in the last 150 years, is when atheists are in charge, guess what? They try to eradicate the theists. They arrest them, they put them on trial, they execute them, they try to get rid of them. They do whatever they can in order to eradicate the theists. This shows historically how these two ideologies cannot coexist. They just can't. And so even though theists, Christian theists, leave room for people to not believe in God on an individual basis, I think it's critical that the idea of atheism as an institutional concept be eradicated. And what I mean by that is our society back in the 60s made a massive shift when it basically said, we're going to be a secular society. And if you want to believe in God or you want to practice your faith, you must do so in private, not in public. And so what happened is secular humanists eradicated Christianity. And you may not recall this, or you may be too young if you're a younger person who listens to this podcast. You may not realize this. But started in the late 70s, early 80s, but in the 80s and 90s, there was massive amounts of lawsuits against people who would everything from secretaries that wore cross earrings. They couldn't wear it to their workplace anymore. You couldn't have a Bible on your desk at work. If you were a teacher in public school, you couldn't have any display of Christian symbolism anywhere. And if you even mentioned that you believed in God, you could be terminated for that. Okay. So what they did is secular humanists, and this always happens. When you look at history, it always tells the truth. They eliminated all that, right? Thinking, okay, now we're a place of non-belief. And then what came into that? The Frankfurt School of Critical Social Theory came in. So the new religion in universities, which became churches, not places of higher learning, they became indoctrinational centers for the new religion of postmodern atheism and progressivism and leftism, to the point where if you didn't toe the line, you would be canceled and you'd be eradicated. So what happened is secular humanism didn't create a more utopian society or a more just society. It simply created a vacuous society. And then what rushed into that vacuum was none other than these highly progressive ideologies on our campuses that just got nuts. And you see that they're anti-Semitic. They're not just anti-Semitic. They are, anti-Christian. They're anti-theism. And all this begs the question, how do you eradicate institutional atheism? That's a tough one. We're going to dig into that more, but it starts with this, and that is that we have to return to the value basis of education that existed up until the 1950s. And until we return to that, educational outcomes are never going to change, and our society is going to continue to be more and more divided, okay? The second belief that is incompatible is this: objective morality versus subjective morality, also commonly known as moral relativism. So moral relativism is a notion that all morality, right and wrong, is subjective in nature. The other side of it is that no, there are morals that are objective. They are always wrong no matter what. And this is, of course, one of the primary proofs of God, and that is how the syllogism works. Without God, there are no objective morals or duties. There are moral objectives and duties, therefore there is a God. So you see, the 1 + 1 is without God, there are no objective moral duties or obligations. There are. So everybody, the second part of the syllogism is that everybody lives as if there are some things that are always wrong no matter what. It's always wrong to torture babies. It's always wrong to commit genocide. It's always wrong to rape women. It's always wrong to kill innocent people. No matter what, these things are always wrong no matter what. And so everybody lives that way. Therefore, there must be a God. This, of course, is comes from C.S. Lewis's book, Mere Christianity, which was phenomenal if you never read it. So moral subjectivism or moral relativism states that, well, things are right and wrong based upon the circumstance. And this is where the concept of, well, this is my truth comes from, right? It's, well, my truth trumps every other truth, okay? And what's so funny is that the people who are espousing this ideology more than anybody else are the ones that end up being the most anti-Semitic, anti-West, anti-Christian that you can imagine. It's fascinating to me that the people who espouse this ideology of subjective morality tend to be the least tolerant group of people you will ever meet. And so this is why these two ideologies are incompatible. They're incompatible. I mean, just think for a moment, if you were to take the entire judicial system and base it upon the notion that, well, morality is subjective in nature. Well, how would you ever write a law? I mean, you can't have a law that says, well, this is wrong, because then someone could argue, well, it was right to me at the time. I felt it was right. So you see how ridiculous this gets really quick. This is why these ideologies now are incompatible. So how do you eradicate a secular humanism, moral relativism ideology from our society? Well, first and foremost, we have to get back to teaching right and wrong. And the basis for right and wrong in our country's and nation's laws in our education system, right? Instead of it being indoctrination of leftist ideology and secular humanist moral relativism, we have to return to some type of objective truth and objective morality. Number 3, the ideology that can't coexist with any other ideology is the notion of truth versus the postmodern notion of there is no truth. And this is what's really interesting. People who say my truth are also the people who are postmodern and say, well, actually, there is no truth. And so the irrationality of this just really starts to weigh on you in a really difficult way. And you start seeing how things are so upside down. In England right now, there is a huge controversy going on, and that is that they have people, Scotland Yard and the police, they call them bobbies over there, are going around and arresting people, knocking on doors when they post something on Facebook or a social media account. And yet they turn a blind eye to Pakistani rape gangs. These are immigrant gangs that have been formed over 20 years who go out and groom young girls as young as 6th grade, and then they ply them for sex. And yet talking about that and pointing that out and even prosecuting those people is what? Is wrong. You can't even point that out and bring that up. But if you make a post on Facebook, you can be arrested for it. And that just goes to show how absurdly upside down this notion of there is no objective truth or postmodern truth plays out in real world circumstances. Conversely speaking, there has to be a sense that there is a truth and that we can know this truth and we can abide by this truth and we can experience this truth. You know, the most important aspect of why these two ideologies are incompatible is if there is no truth and there is no reality, then there's no meaning and purpose for your existence whatsoever. There is none. I mean, there's no reason for you to find any meaning in your own existence. It is the basis of what philosophers call nihilism. And nihilism has always been a very, let's just say, destructive force on young people in particular. The last one is this, and this might shock you a little bit, but it is basically the concept of a free market economy versus socialism or communism. What most people don't understand is you can't be a little communist, right? You can either be completely communist or complete free market. You can't be both. Now, what's interesting is in a free market, right, you might have small groups of people who want to function as communists. You know, it was really popular in the 70s. A lot of people have forgotten this, but it was really popular in the 70s to say, wow, if you had communist leanings or socialistic leanings, you could go and join a commune. And there are various places, the hippies went out and tried to start a whole bunch of communes in America. Almost all of them have failed. There's a few that are still functioning, but the vast majority of them have failed, okay? And so that's really fascinating to me, is that whenever you try it over and over again, it fails. And the opposite, the antithesis to communism and socialism is a free market economy based upon property ownership. Now, you know what's so interesting is over the years that I've been doing this podcast, I've said over and over and over again is that, economically, what my primary concern is as a follower of Christ, it's about the poor. It's about giving opportunity to the poor, allowing the poor to develop economic issues. And if you care about the poor, if you think that poverty is an issue that really needs to be addressed and solved, then you're going to be a free market capitalist guy. The other reason I'm a free market capitalist guy is because any other form of economy is slavery. And I believe in the liberty and freedom of the human heart. You see, everything starts and ends with belief. And these beliefs are incompatible with one another. And until we can all find people or have some agreement of what we actually believe, our nation will always be divided. And the way to get to more unity is not simply saying, oh, let's just forget about our differences, our core beliefs. Let's just tolerate one over the other. Because Christianity can tolerate little pieces of communism, can tolerate atheism. But when communism, socialism, atheism, and postmodernism get in charge, the first thing they do is use their power to eradicate Christian ideology, belief, and thought. That's something you don't want to ever forget. So here I am, walking the streets of McFarland, Wisconsin, one of the most liberal ideological places in the United States of America, on the streets proclaiming the truth of the gospel of Jesus Christ. And that's why they call me the Salty Pastor. Until then, signing off. And remember, what you believe is one of the most important things about you.